My name is Ethan Carter. I'm 31 years old. The strange thing is that nobody ever warned me. Nobody tells you that the people who smile beside you in family photos can also be the ones waiting for the perfect moment to embarrass you. For me, that moment came on my wedding day. But to understand why it hurts so much, you need to know one thing first. My older brother, Logan, had always been my favorite. It wasn't something our parents ever admitted. They didn't have to. We could all see it. When Logan forgot Mom's birthday, she laughed and called him busy. If I forgot to buy milk after work, she'd sigh and tell everyone I couldn't be trusted with simple things. When Logan quit 3 different jobs in 2 years, Dad said he was finding himself. When I worked late every night to save money for my future, Dad barely noticed. After a while, I stopped expecting praise. I just kept working. Maybe that's why buying my first car meant so much to me. It wasn't a fancy sports car. It wasn't even new. Welcome to a new video of an American mom's tale. I hope you'll enjoy the story. If you are new here, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comment section. Thanks. Now let's get back to the story. It was a silver Toyota Camry that had already traveled almost 70,000 miles before I bought it. I paid every dollar myself. No loans from my parents. No help from relatives. For 3 years I skipped vacations, cooked cheap dinners at home, and worked weekend shifts as an electrical engineer until I finally held the keys in my hand. Some people saw an ordinary sedan. I saw proof that I could build something on my own. Whenever my fiancée, Claire, climbed into the passenger seat, she'd smile and tap the dashboard. I know everyone wants a luxury car, she once joked, but this one got us through our first dates. She wasn't wrong. That Camry carried us everywhere. Late-night ice cream runs. Weekend road trips. Visits to her grandparents. The drive where I nervously asked her to marry me. Every memory seemed to live inside that car. Which is why I spent an entire Saturday washing and polishing it before the wedding. The morning sun reflected off the silver paint until it almost looked brand new. I stood back and smiled. It still cleans up pretty well, I whispered. Dad walked past, glanced at it for less than 2 seconds, and shrugged. You should have rented something nicer for the wedding. That was all he said. Not, good job. Not, looks great. Just another reminder that whatever I had was never enough. Claire squeezed my hand after he walked away. I think it's perfect. She always knew how to make the noise disappear. By noon, guests began arriving at the country club. Music floated through the garden. Children ran across the grass chasing bubbles. My cousins laughed while taking pictures beside the flower arch. Everything looked exactly how Claire and I had dreamed. For the first time all morning, I relaxed. Maybe today would finally be about us. Then I noticed Logan. He wasn't talking to guests. He wasn't helping anyone. He stood near my Camry with 3 of our cousins, pointing at it while laughing. Every few seconds, they looked toward me. Claire noticed too. What are they doing? She asked quietly. I forced a smile. Probably nothing. But something inside me didn't believe my own answer. 10 minutes later, Logan walked toward me wearing the biggest grin I'd ever seen. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders like we were best friends. Little brother, he said loudly enough for nearby guests to hear, I hope you brought the money. I frowned. What money? $5 million. I laughed because I honestly thought he was joking. What are you talking about? He looked around dramatically before raising his voice even higher. The payment for the Toyota Camry. The conversations around us stopped. People turned their heads. Someone lowered a camera. Even the violinist seemed to miss a note. I stared at my brother. My car? I asked. Logan nodded with complete confidence. Yeah. You can't just use my Camry for your wedding without paying for it. For a second, I couldn't even speak. Because the car wasn't his. It had never been his. The title, the insurance, every payment, every repair receipt, all of it had my name on it. Yet there he stood, smiling like he was about to perform the greatest joke of his life. Then he said the words that changed everything. If you can't pay $5 million today, he announced, maybe you shouldn't be getting married at all. And suddenly, every eye at the wedding was on me. Nobody laughed. That was the first thing I noticed. Logan had expected everyone to burst into laughter and clap him on the back for another one of his funny jokes. Instead, the garden became so quiet that I could hear the fountain splashing behind us. I searched his face, hoping he would grin and say, "Relax, I'm kidding." He didn't. He folded his arms and looked at me as if he were waiting for an answer. "Well?" he asked. "Everyone's waiting." A few guests shifted uncomfortably. My aunt whispered something to her husband. One of Claire's friends slowly lowered her phone after stopping a video she had been recording. I took a slow breath. "Logan," I said calmly, "the Camry is mine." He laughed loudly. "That's cute." "No," I replied. "It really is." He shook his head. "You've always had a big imagination." The words stung because they reminded me of childhood. Whenever something unfair happened, Logan would tell everyone I was making things up. If he broke one of my toys, somehow I became careless one. If he borrowed money and never paid it back, Mom would tell me to stop keeping score. Standing there in my wedding suit, I suddenly felt like I was 12 years old again. Dad stepped forward. Instead of asking Logan to stop, he looked at me with tired eyes. "Ethan," he sighed, "don't make a scene today." I blinked. "Me? Just apologize to your brother and move on." The words hit harder than I expected. Apologize? For owning my own car? Claire stared at my father in disbelief. "Mr. Carter," she said carefully, "Ethan isn't making a scene." Dad barely looked at her. "This is a family matter." Claire's hand slipped into mine. "I am his family." Her voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Several guests nodded quietly. For the first time, I realized people were watching much more closely than I thought. Logan noticed it too. His smile faded for only a second before he raised his voice again. "Fine. Let's settle it right now." He pointed toward the parking lot. "If that's your car, prove it." A few people exchanged confused looks. I frowned. "What?" "The title." He crossed his arms confidently. "Show everyone the title." I almost laughed. "The title is locked in my safe at home." "Convenient," Logan replied. Then he turned toward the crowd. "See? No proof." A couple of Claire's uncles looked puzzled. One of them quietly asked another guest, "Don't people usually keep the title at home?" "Of course they do," came the answer. But Logan ignored them. He had found his stage. He walked slowly around me like a game show host. "My little brother always wanted attention," he announced. "Guess today he decided stealing my car would help." Claire stepped in front of me. "Enough." Her eyes locked onto Logan. "You know that isn't true." He shrugged. "Can you prove it?" She opened her mouth, then stopped. Not because she doubted me. Because proving ownership wasn't something anyone carried to a wedding. Logan knew that. That was the whole point. He wasn't trying to win an argument. He was trying to make me look helpless. Mom finally walked over, smoothing her dress as though she were annoyed by the interruption. "What is going on?" Before I could answer, Logan spoke first. "Ethan refuses to pay for using my Camry." Mom looked at me. Then, without asking a single question, she said, "Ethan, this isn't the day to argue." I stared at her. "You actually believe him?" She hesitated. Only for a moment. Then she said the words that hurt more than anything else. "I just don't want people talking." People talking. That mattered more to her than the truth. Claire squeezed my hand tighter. I could feel her anger. Not loud anger. The kind that made her fingers tremble. She whispered, "You don't deserve this." I looked around the garden. The flowers. The white chairs. The wedding cake is waiting under its glass cover. The children who had stopped playing. Every beautiful detail we had spent months planning was disappearing behind one ugly lie. Then I noticed someone standing near the entrance. It was my best man, Noah. Unlike everyone else, he wasn't watching Logan. He was watching me. Then he slowly reached into his suit pocket. He frowned. A strange expression crossed his face, like he had just remembered something important. He walked toward us without saying a word. When he reached my side, he leaned close enough that only I could hear him. "Ethan," he whispered, "don't argue." I looked at him in surprise. "Why?" A small smile appeared on Noah's face. "Because I think your brother just made the biggest mistake of his life." Before I could ask what he meant, Noah quietly pulled a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I recognized it immediately. It was a copy of something I had completely forgotten existed. And suddenly, everything was about to change. I looked down at the folded paper in Noah's hand. At first, I couldn't remember why he had it. Then it hit me. 3 months before the wedding, I had asked Noah to help me organize some important documents while Claire and I packed boxes for our new house. We made copies of everything: our marriage license application, insurance papers, bank records, and my car documents, just in case we ever needed them. I had forgotten all about those copies. Noah hadn't. He unfolded the paper carefully, making sure the wind didn't catch it. Logan rolled his eyes. "What now?" Another excuse. Noah didn't answer him. Instead, he looked at me. "Mind if I show everyone?" I nodded. "Go ahead." Noah held the paper where the closest guests could see it. "This is a copy of the vehicle registration." Logan laughed. "A fake piece of paper doesn't prove anything." Noah calmly continued. "It lists the owner's full name." He paused for just a second. Then he read it aloud. "Registered owner, Ethan James Carter." Silence. Real silence. Even the children stopped whispering. Noah turned the paper around so the guests nearest him could read it for themselves. Claire's uncle adjusted his glasses. "I can see it," he said. "His name is right there." Another guest nodded. "So is the vehicle number." Logan's smile disappeared. He took one quick step forward. "That's fake." Noah folded the paper again. "It also has the state registration seal and the same vehicle identification number that's printed on the windshield. Anyone can walk outside and check." Several guests looked toward the parking lot. One of my cousins quietly slipped away. A few seconds later, 2 more people followed him. They weren't leaving the wedding. They were going to look at the car. For the first time all afternoon, Logan looked nervous. Mom noticed it too. "Maybe," she said softly, "we should stop this now." I stared at her. Stop it now? Not when I was being accused. Only now, when the truth was starting to appear. Logan pointed at Noah. "You planned this." "No," Noah replied. "You planned this." Those 5 words landed harder than shouting ever could. Dad rubbed his forehead. "This has gone far enough." I looked at him. It could have ended the moment Logan told the truth. Dad didn't answer. Because he couldn't. A minute later, the cousins came back from the parking lot. My cousin Megan held up her phone. The VIN number matches. She looked directly at Logan. And the registration copy. Another cousin added quietly, the insurance sticker inside the windshield also has Ethan's name. The crowd began murmuring. The sound spread through the garden like a wave. So it really is his. Why would Logan lie? This is their wedding day. I watched Logan's face change. First, confidence. Then I was confused. Then angry. He suddenly pointed at me. So what? Maybe it's in your name now. I frowned. What does that even mean? You probably talked me into signing something years ago. Several guests exchanged puzzled looks. His story was changing every few seconds. Claire folded her arms. First you said Ethan stole your car. She took one slow step forward. Now you're saying you signed it away. Logan opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Claire continued. So which story is true? Again, no answer. I wasn't angry anymore. I was watching something much bigger happen. For years, my brother had always spoken first. People believed him before anyone else had a chance to explain. Today was different. Today, people were asking questions. Questions he couldn't answer. Then something unexpected happened. My grandmother, who had been sitting quietly near the front row, slowly stood up. She was 81 years old. She used a wooden cane and rarely interrupted family arguments. Everyone respected her. She looked straight at Logan. I remember that car. He swallowed. So. I remember Ethan bringing it to my house after he bought it. She smiled gently at me. He was so proud. He even showed me every scratch he planned to fix. Then she turned back toward Logan. You weren't even there. Nobody spoke. Grandma wasn't finished. I also remember you asking Ethan if you could borrow it for a weekend. She shook her head slowly. He told you no because you already had 2 speeding tickets. Logan's face turned pale. I don't remember that. I do. Her voice stayed calm. When you left my house, you slammed the front door because you were angry. A few relatives looked at each other. Some of them nodded. Like they remembered it too. Small pieces of the past were falling into place. One by one. The picture was becoming clearer. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It wasn't confusing. It wasn't a joke that went too far. It was something planned. Something prepared. I looked at my brother and quietly asked the question that had been growing in my mind since this nightmare began. Logan. He looked up. Why? His eyes shifted away from mine. For the first time in years, my older brother had no clever answer. But someone else did. Behind him, I heard a woman's voice whisper to another guest. I think this was never about the car. Those words stayed with me. Because deep inside, I knew she was right. The Camry had only been an excuse. The real reason for what Logan had done was still hidden. And before this wedding was over, everyone would find out exactly what it was. Nobody moved. The music had stopped. The wedding planner quietly asked the violinist to wait, and even the servers carrying trays of drinks stood frozen, unsure of what to do next. I looked at Logan again. You asked me for $5 million, I said. That wasn't random. Why that number? His jaw tightened. I don't have to explain myself. No, I replied. But after everything you just said, I think everyone would like an explanation. A few guests nodded. The mood had changed completely. People were no longer wondering whether I had done something wrong. They were wondering what Logan was hiding. He looked toward our parents, almost as if he expected them to rescue him. Dad cleared his throat. "Ethan, enough. The ceremony should start." I met his eyes. "I've been trying to start this wedding for 20 minutes. No one argued with that." Claire stepped beside me, her wedding dress moving gently in the breeze. She wasn't crying. She looked calm. That calmness gave me strength. She quietly said, "Let's hear the truth. Then we can get married with nothing hanging over us." Mom looked nervous. "Logan, maybe just apologize." He turned to her in surprise. "Apologize? Just say you went too far." He shook his head. "I didn't." His answer made several relatives whisper to each other. Grandma slowly sat back down, disappointment written across her face. Then my cousin Megan spoke. "Logan, if this wasn't about the car, then what was it?" He laughed once. A short, forced laugh. "You people really don't get it." "Then help us understand," Noah said. For a few seconds, Logan simply stared at me. His smile was gone. So was his confidence. What replaced it was something I had seen before. Jealousy. I remembered little moments from the past. When I earned a scholarship. When I bought my first house. When Claire said yes after I proposed. Each time, Logan smiled for the picture. But afterward, he always disappeared early. At the time, I thought nothing of it. Now those memories felt different. Finally, Logan spoke. Everything always works out for him. The word surprised everyone. He pointed straight at me. He gets a good job. He raised another finger. He gets a nice house. Another finger. He gets the girl everyone likes. His voice grew louder. And now he has the perfect wedding. I blinked. "So, this is because you're jealous?" "It's not jealousy," he shouted. "It's fair." Noah quietly muttered, "That doesn't sound fair at all." Logan ignored him. "You know what everyone says about Ethan?" He answered his own question. "He's responsible. He's hardworking. He's the dependable one." His fists tightened. I got tired of hearing it. Claire looked at him with genuine sadness. "So you tried to ruin our wedding?" I wanted one day, Logan snapped, where people talked about me instead of him. The words hung in the air. Nobody interrupted. Because everyone had just heard the truth. Not about the car. About his heart. He had planned this because he couldn't stand seeing someone else happy. Mom slowly covered her mouth. "Oh, Logan." He looked at her. "You always told me I deserved more." She froze. I never meant. You always said Ethan had everything easy." I turned toward Mom. She couldn't look at me. Small memories began returning to me. Whenever something good happened in my life, she would quietly tell Logan not to worry because life isn't fair. Instead of teaching him to celebrate someone else's success, she had fed his resentment. Maybe she hadn't meant to. But she had. Dad rubbed both hands across his face. "This has gone too far." "No," Grandma said firmly. "It started years ago." Everyone looked at her. She continued softly. "We praised one son every time he tried." She looked at me. "And ignored the other after he succeeded." No one argued. Because it was true. I remembered graduating near the top of my engineering class. Dad had shaken my hand for 2 seconds before asking Logan if he wanted to go fishing that weekend. I remembered buying my house. Mom's first question wasn't whether I was happy. It was whether I could let Logan stay there if he ever needed a place. I had always thought those moments were small. Standing in the wedding garden, I realized they had been building toward this day for years. Claire slipped her arm through mine. "I'm proud of you," she whispered. "For what? You haven't yelled once." I smiled sadly. "I've wanted to." "I know." Then Noah looked at his watch. "Ethan." "What?" "The ceremony was supposed to begin half an hour ago." I looked at the rows of guests. Some looked embarrassed. Others looked angry. A few simply looked tired. Our wedding day had become a family argument. That hurt more than Logan's lies. I slowly turned toward my brother. "This is your last chance." He folded his arms. "For what?" "To tell everyone you're sorry." He stared at me for several long seconds. Then he smiled again. It wasn't the confident smile from earlier. It was smaller. Colder. "If I had another chance," he said quietly, "I'd do it all over again." A shocked gasp spread through the garden. At that moment, something inside me became perfectly clear. I wasn't losing my brother that day. I had lost him a long time ago. I had just been the last person to realize it. For a long moment, nobody said a word. The breeze gently moved the white ribbons tied to the chairs. Somewhere beyond the garden, birds were singing, as if they had no idea that a family was falling apart only a few feet away. I looked at Logan one last time. His face showed no regret. Not even a little. Claire quietly touched my arm. "Ethan." I turned to her. "What are you thinking?" I looked around at our guests. Nearly 200 people had taken time off work, booked flights, bought gifts, and traveled to celebrate our marriage. Instead, they had watched my own brother try to destroy it. Then I made a decision. I stepped away from Logan. Away from my parents. Away from the argument. I walked to the front where the wedding arch stood covered with white roses. Everyone watched me. I picked up the microphone that had been prepared for the ceremony. It felt heavier than I expected. I smiled at the guests. "I'm sorry." Several people immediately shook their heads. "No," someone called out. "You don't need to apologize." I smiled again. "Maybe not for what happened. But I am sorry that the happiest day of Claire's and my life became something none of you expected." A few guests quietly clapped. I continued. "My brother wanted today to be about him." I looked back at Logan. "It won't." Those 3 words changed the atmosphere. I turned toward the wedding officiant. "Are you still ready?" The older man smiled warmly. "I've been ready all afternoon." Soft laughter spread through the guests. For the first time that day, people weren't laughing at someone. They were laughing together. The tension eased just a little. I reached for Claire's hand. She smiled through watery eyes. "I thought we'd lost today." "So did I. But we haven't." Before we could step beneath the flower arch, Logan shouted from behind us. "You're seriously going to ignore what happened?" I slowly turned around. "No. I exposed you." "No. You embarrassed yourself." Again I shook my head. "You embarrassed yourself." His face became bright red. Dad finally walked over to him. "That's enough." Logan pulled his arm away. "You always do this." Dad looked confused. "Do what?" "You pick his side." Several relatives stared at him in disbelief. It was probably the strangest thing anyone had said all day. My cousin Megan quietly whispered, "Since when?" Even Dad looked surprised. For years he had defended Logan. Today was the first time he had ever told him to stop. Logan couldn't accept it. He looked around wildly, searching for someone who still agreed with him. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved toward him. The silence told him everything. Mom slowly walked over. She reached for his hand. Let's go home. He pulled away from her too. No. His voice cracked. I'm not leaving. Grandma sighed. Then sit down and let your brother get married. I won't. That answer seemed to break something inside Mom. Tears filled her eyes. You ruined his wedding. Logan stared at her. You said he always gets everything. I was wrong. Those words came out almost as a whisper. I should never have compared my sons. I looked at Mom. It wasn't a complete apology. But it was the first honest thing I had heard her say all day. Logan shook his head. No. His voice was shaking now. You can't change sides. This isn't about sides, Mom replied. It's about right and wrong. He laughed bitterly. So now I'm the bad guy. Grandma answered before anyone else could. No, Logan. She stood carefully, leaning on her cane. Today you chose to become one. The words were gentle. But they carried the weight of a lifetime. Logan looked around one final time. He expected someone to defend him. No one did. Not our cousins. Not our parents. Not even his closest friends. He took one slow step backward. Then another. Without saying goodbye, he turned and walked across the parking lot. The sound of his dress shoes echoed against the pavement until he reached his own truck. A moment later, the engine started. Everyone watched as he drove away. Nobody chased him. Nobody called him back. When the truck disappeared around the corner, the entire garden felt strangely peaceful. The wedding planner walked over carefully. She smiled at Claire. Would you still like to continue? Claire looked at me. What do you think? I smiled. I think we've already survived the hardest part of marriage. That made everyone laugh again. A real laugh this time. The guests returned to their seats. Children began running across the grass again. The musicians lifted their instruments. The first soft notes of the wedding song floated through the garden. As Claire and I stood beneath the flower arch, I noticed Noah quietly slip something into my jacket pocket. What was that? I whispered. He smiled. Just in case. After the ceremony began, I reached into my pocket for a second. Inside was the folded copy of my car registration. Written across the back, in Noah's handwriting, were just 7 simple words. Keep records. Never argue with people keeping score. I smiled. For the first time that day, I understood that the paper had never been about proving I owned a Toyota Camry. It had proved something much more important. The truth doesn't need the loudest voice. It only needs the right evidence. And although my wedding was finally beginning, I had a feeling the real consequences of Logan's choice were only just starting. When the music began again, it sounded different. Not because the musicians were playing another song. Because I was hearing it with a quieter heart. Claire walked toward me, her father gently placing her hand into mine. The guests stood, smiling through tears, and for a few minutes the ugly memories of the afternoon faded behind the happiness we had waited so long to feel. The ceremony itself was simple. We promised to be honest with each other. We promised to stand together when life became difficult. After everything that had happened, those promises meant even more. I do, Claire said without hesitation. I do, I answered. The guests burst into applause. For the first time all day, I wasn't thinking about Logan. I was thinking about the future. After the ceremony, people lined up to congratulate us. Many hugged Claire first. Then they hugged me a little tighter than usual. My Uncle Richard patted my shoulder. I've known you since you were a little boy, he said. You handled today better than most grown men ever could. I almost didn't. But you did. Another guest smiled. Your brother wanted everyone to remember him. She looked around at the laughing guests. They'll remember how you acted instead. That thought stayed with me. People rarely remember who starts the argument. They remember who ends it. As the reception began, children danced near the stage while grandparents clapped along with the music. Little by little, the wedding became joyful again. Even the wedding planner whispered, "This may be the most emotional wedding I've ever seen." Later that evening, while Claire was talking with her friends, Noah walked over carrying 2 glasses of lemonade. He handed one to me. "You okay?" "I think so. You've been saying that all day." I laughed quietly. Maybe I'm still convincing myself. We stood together for a moment, watching everyone enjoy themselves. Then Noah lowered his voice. "You know this isn't over." "I know. Your brother planned this." I nodded. People don't usually spend weeks planning something unless they're hiding other things too. His words made me think. Logan hadn't simply lost his temper. He had chosen the date. He had chosen the place. He had chosen the exact moment when every relative and friend would be watching. That took planning. Which meant this wasn't one bad decision. There were many decisions. One after another. Just then, my phone buzzed. I looked down. There was a message from an unknown number. It contained only one sentence. "This isn't finished." No name. No explanation. I didn't need either. Noah glanced at the screen. "Logan?" "I think so." "Save it." I looked at him. "Don't delete anything." I smiled faintly. "You really believe in keeping records." "So do you now." He was right. Months earlier, I probably would have ignored the message. Now I took a screenshot, saved it, and backed it up to my cloud storage before putting the phone back into my pocket. I wasn't collecting revenge. I was collecting facts. A little later, Mom approached us. She looked smaller than she had that morning. Her makeup had faded, and her eyes were red from crying. "Ethan." I waited. "I don't expect you to forgive me today." I stayed quiet. She nodded slowly. I kept making excuses for Logan because I thought protecting him was the same as loving him. She looked toward the empty chair where Logan should have been sitting. I was wrong. I finally spoke. "You didn't only hurt me." A tear rolled down her cheek. "I know. You hurt him too." She covered her face with one hand. "I know." For the first time in years, she wasn't defending herself. She wasn't blaming someone else. She was simply listening. "I hope one day we can talk again," she whispered. I hope so too. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't rejection. It was simply the truth. Healing takes longer than one conversation. That evening, as the sun began to set behind the trees, Claire and I stepped outside onto the terrace. The parking lot was almost empty now. Only one silver Toyota Camry remained near the entrance. "My Camry." Claire laughed softly. "You know." "What?" "That car has become famous." I laughed with her. I was thinking the same thing. She rested her head against my shoulder. "One day we'll probably replace it." "Probably. But I don't think I'll ever forget it." "Neither will I. Not because it was expensive. Not because it was beautiful. But because, on the hardest day of my life, that ordinary car exposed years of hidden jealousy, forced painful truths into the open, and reminded me of something I should have learned long ago. People who keep score will always look for ways to embarrass you. People who keep honest records never have to shout. As the stars slowly appeared above us, I slipped my hand into Claire's. Our wedding day hadn't gone the way we planned. But somehow, it has given us something even stronger than a perfect memory. It showed us exactly who would stand beside us when life became difficult. And that lesson was worth far more than any car could ever be. 3 months passed after our wedding. Life became quieter. Claire and I settled into our new home, and every morning I drove the same silver Toyota Camry to work. Sometimes I smiled when I looked at it. It wasn't just a car anymore. It reminded me that truth doesn't disappear just because someone tells a louder story. People at work had heard about the wedding through friends who had attended. They didn't ask many questions. Instead, they treated me with the same respect they always had. That taught me another lesson. Your reputation is built over years. One lie cannot destroy it if your actions have always shown the truth. Things were different for Logan. Family members stopped inviting him to birthdays and holiday dinners for a while. Not because they hated him. Because nobody trusted him. Whenever he told a story, people quietly wondered if it was true. That was the real price of what he had done. Trust, once broken, is very hard to earn back. One evening, Grandma invited Claire and me over for dinner. Her little house smelled like fresh bread, just as it had when I was a child. After dessert, she handed me a small wooden box. "I've been saving this for the right time," she said. Inside were old family photographs. In nearly every picture, I was standing in the background while Logan stood in the center. Grandma sighed. "I kept these because they remind me that sometimes adults make mistakes they don't even notice." She gently touched one photo. "We all should have seen what was happening sooner." I smiled sadly. "We can't change those days." "No," she agreed. "But we can learn from them." A week later, my phone rang. The screen showed Logan's name. I stared at it for several seconds before answering. "Hello." His voice was quieter than I had ever heard it. "I want to meet you." I didn't answer right away. "I'm not asking for money," he said. "I'm asking for 10 minutes." We met at a small coffee shop the following Saturday. He looked tired. Older somehow. After we sat down, neither of us spoke for almost a minute. Finally, Logan looked at me. "I lost my job." "I'm sorry to hear that." My boss saw a video from the wedding. I wasn't surprised. Several guests had recorded what happened. "I guess people don't like employees who lie in public," he said with a weak smile. He took a deep breath. "I blamed you for everything." I listened without interrupting. "The truth is." He looked down at his hands. "I couldn't stand watching you succeed while I stayed in the same place. You could have changed your own life." "I know." Another long silence followed. Then he quietly asked, "Can you forgive me?" I thought carefully before answering. "I don't want to carry anger for the rest of my life." He looked hopeful. "But forgiveness isn't the same as trust." His smile faded. "I understand. It will take time." He nodded. I deserve that. For the first time in years, I believed he actually meant what he was saying. Would everything become perfect? No. Some things never return to the way they were. But honesty is where rebuilding begins. As Claire and I drove home in the Camry that afternoon, she reached over and held my hand at a red light. "How do you feel?" "Lighter." "Because you forgave him?" I shook my head. "Because I finally stopped trying to prove my worth to people who refuse to see it." She smiled. "I like this version of you." "So do I." A few months later, we welcomed our first baby into the world. When I carried my son out of the hospital, I buckled him into the back seat of that same Toyota Camry. I looked at the tiny face sleeping peacefully. Then I made myself a quiet promise. I would never compare my children. I would never teach one child to feel more important than another. I would celebrate kindness instead of competition. And if they ever argued, I would search for the truth before choosing a side. As I started the engine, Claire smiled at me. "Ready to go home?" I looked through the windshield, remembering the day that same car had nearly become the reason my wedding was destroyed. Instead, it became the reason the truth finally came out. People often think generosity must be rewarded. It isn't. Being kind is still the right thing, even when nobody notices. People think family should always come first. Sometimes healthy boundaries come first. People think the loudest person wins. But in the end, those who keep score usually lose to those who quietly keep records. I drove our little family home with a full heart. Not because everything in life has become perfect, but because it had finally become honest. And that was worth far more than $5 million. Or any Toyota Camry could ever be.